Salutations, everyone! Welcome back to another Total Warhammer 3 guide. I'm Lord Formant, and today the guide is on the Golden Order of Balthazar Gelt. So this video is part of a larger playlist and series, so if you don't see what you're looking for here, by all means, go check out the other stuff. I highly recommend if you want to learn about the technology, the economy, or the other factions, go there in this playlist and the larger series. And if you enjoyed this video, please do like, comment, subscribe. You know, all the great things that encourage people to make more videos. Anyway, let's get started. So Balthazar Gelt has migrated from the Southern Empire to Cathay. So he is located right next to the Western provinces. Here's the Great Bastion for context. So you're far in the south, which is nice because right now there's really no legendary lord factions down here. The closest you get are the Dark Elf Pirates and Nakai the Wanderer. Or technically you have the Vampire Count and Nurgle over here, but they don't tend to get into this area of the Empire. So Gelt, at this point, has been sent as an embassy, and you can kind of read about it in his starting path to victory and stuff. Basically, he's helping the Western provinces subdue rebels in the south, which is nice because these guys have a lot of other enemies to fight at the beginning of the game. Now, Balthazar Gelt has some unique technologies and mechanics, and we're going to go over those right now. But the first thing I want to highlight is he does not start the game with Imperial authority. Many of you are used to having Imperial authority on Franz and Gelt. Gelt no longer has that at the start of the game. He can get it later, and I'll go over that when we get to that part of the guide. Anyhow, let's look at his unique technologies. So he has the standard Empire tech tree with the exception of this bottom two categories. So state troops here is accessible by some of the other Empire factions. Basically, you spend a large amount of money, you unlock Elector Count state troops. They are very good, especially early game. You can get access to mortars and steam tanks without having to build the buildings. This would be the one I recommend. Swords of the Empire, Spears of the Empire, probably, and maybe Marksmen. I'd ignore Riders, especially the Outriders stuff here. Knights of the Empire, a little bit more useful, but not particularly strong. So if you get a lot of money early game, like migrating back to the Empire, we'll talk about that later, you may want to pick up a couple of those. But the unique category that is unique to Balthazar Gelt himself is the Supreme Patriarch tree. There's only two in it. I feel like there should be more. But the first one, College Archives, gives you more arcane essays post-battle. Arcane essays is the unique currency available to Balthazar Gelt, which allows him to use one of his other mechanics. We'll get to that in a second. The other thing is his second technology increases the amount of uses of Cataclysm spells. This is an in-battle spell. It does a lot of damage, can hit really anywhere on the map, and it strengthens your army. At least this default one. There are other stuff in that category. Now, the other mechanic here Gelt has access to is the Colleges of Magic. If you've played Balthazar Gelt before, you'll know he didn't have this mechanic, which makes this a lot more exciting. And it's nice because it represents his status as the Supreme Patriarch of the Orders. So you have access to the standard 8 Colleges of Magic, and once you own a settlement, you can then quickly click and summon a wizard to your army. Right here, create a gold wizard. Now, Gelt himself is probably the best gold wizard in the game, so it's not worth recruiting a gold wizard. So basically, you're looking at 7 of these. Now, the reason this is an option is if you have a second lord, you might want to stick a gold wizard in that army. This applies to all of them. The cost is the same. Some of the wizards are better than others. I'll talk about that in a minute, but let's go over what the repeatable actions are. So each order has unique actions you can pay to use, some of which are better than others. Gelt here obviously gets to recruit a wizard, but he can also transform 150 of his arcane essays into 3,500 treasury. This makes Gelt's early game economy extremely powerful. Think of it as it's like 1,100 something extra income a turn because you can cast it every 3 turns. You want to cast it every three 3 turns at the beginning of the game, if possible. You're going to want a lot of money if you stay in Cathay, and even more if you head back to the Empire. Again, I'll talk about that later. You also have Compelled Corrosion, which is an effect that affects the region he's in. Other ones have similar ones. This one here, we're just looking at the Amethyst Order, gives another Cataclysm spell. So that's where that technology adds a +1 to it. You would get to cast this twice. Different wizards have different spells. Some are more useful than others, but overall they're very powerful. Especially I like this one, the Grey Order's Dance of Despair. Removes a ton of attributes. Very useful. Now, below that, there are the single-use actions. For a large amount of arcane SEs, you can get unique items, like Balthazar's Robes of the Supreme Patriarch, a unique sword, but the same applies to all the orders. They have get an item that can only be equipped by that type of wizard, but then the latter 1 or 2 for Gelt's Gold Order, you get a discount on all that magic cast in that lore of that magical lore for all armies for the rest of the game. If you can do this, it's worth doing. However, don't focus on rushing gathering the arcane essays to do this. You're much more likely to want to be summoning wizards and making money at the early part of the game. And this one gives Gelt a spell, which is really quite useful. Now, let's go over the various wizards and which ones I found particularly to be the most useful. Now, certain wizards are better at casting spells in battle, and other of them give you better repeatable actions on that army. So let's start with the repeatable actions one. If you have a Jade Wizard in your army, you have access to the Restoration spell action, I guess, technically. It allows you to instantly heal the army with the Jade Wizard in it. As you can imagine, replenishment is really powerful. Having full replenishment is unbelievably broken. You can fight Pyrrhic victories, instant heal your army, and push the advantage. Now, it is 10 turns. I don't know if they're going to nerf it even further, make the cost higher, because right now this feels unbelievably strong. You're going to want to use it when your army is heavily damaged and you still want to fight another battle. You're fighting on the defense. There's a multitude of uses for it. Now, Jade Wizards in battle can heal your armies, as well as provide shields and stuff. It is very useful to have one in your army at that point anyway, but the repeatable action guarantees the fact that you should pretty much have a Jade Wizard in every single one of your armies by the late game. Now, for the other one that has a very useful repeatable action is the Celestial College. They have access to Celestial Scrying, which instantly replenishes the action points of the army with the wizard in it. This means you can march a long way, even force march, cast this, march again. You can fight a battle, they run away, you can't catch them, cast this, you can catch them. Now, it's got an 8-turn cooldown, so you're not going to be able to use it constantly, but I found it very useful, especially if you stick in Cathay, just traversing some of these very large provinces. It really helps with that. It also helps you rush around to defend your little empire. Now, the next wizard I highly recommend is the Bright Wizard for casting spells in battle. The Golden Order Gelt has fairly good battle spells, but when it comes to fighting armies with regeneration, so like Nurgle or the Vampire Counts, both of which exist right here or back in the Empire, the normal Sylvania faction, you're going to want fire to prevent their regeneration. Take a Bright Wizard. Their abilities are not particularly unbelievable. I mean, I like this one. Cause wall breaches. You don't necessarily need siege weapons. It's kind of cool. Plus, they can't build towers at the beginning of the game. But outside of that, really, the Bright Wizard's there to kill things in battle. Now, you have access to the other wizards. I did not particularly find the Amethyst wizards game-breaking. They're nice when you're fighting vampires because you can single target their lords and stuff. But honestly, outside of that, they don't contribute as much as either the Celestials, which can drop, thunderbolts and comets and stuff, or the Bright Wizards' firestorms. Jade Wizard doesn't do damage, so don't think of them as a combat one. Think of them as a buffing unit and healer. I particularly don't like the Amber Order. The Light Order has some unique stuff. Time Amok here is kind of cool. You freeze enemies in place. You can give your army barriers. I suppose if you're going into big battles, you could use this. But honestly, I think the Lore of Light is the weakest of the lores in the game at the moment. Unless you're playing a faction that desperately needs the buffs. But between that, the Grey Order, really the last three I think are the weakest ones for you to summon. Doesn't say that their abilities aren't useful, but you don't want too many wizards in an army. Really, you want to limit to 3 or 4. That way you have enough winds of magic to cast. Now, the other thing is, and I'll explain his faction summary up here, he gets additional power reserve for each wizard, lord, or hero in the army. This is helpful in terms of casting spells. The reality, though, is it should probably be more like 10 to encourage you to have more wizards in the army than 4. Also, your wizards are recruited at a higher level, which is really nice. Now, if we look at Gelt himself, he has the Transmuter trait. All spellcasters in his own army gain experience faster, which is really nice. It's cheaper for him to cast Lore of Metal spells already. If you take the one-time single-use action, that's 40% cheaper, meaning you can keep dropping Searing Doom on the enemy until the cows come home. They also has the ability to give more armor to his army, which is really handy for the Empire, which already has decent armor, but this makes them heavily armored monsters in combat. Now, he's got the standard blue line and red line of the other Empire Lords. He also has a fairly standard Golden Wizard tree as well. So the things to note in the tree is, at the beginning, you're probably going to want Leader of Renown, just so that you can recruit troops quicker. So Route Marcher always is usually your starting one or second one. You can make an argument for Gelt getting Searing Doom, but he can already cast it. All this does is make it allow you to overcast it. Once you get Leader of Renown, probably a point in Fervent or Restoring Presence. Then you want Irrepressible, and then my advice is get Logician, so you can get Casualty Replenishment. Yes, you have a Jade Wizard for instant replenishment, but it's only every 10 turns. Being able to replenish outside of that is really useful as well. Quartermaster for the reduced upkeep, and then Headhunter for the wonderful bonuses to everything. More recruit rank, upkeep, really helps the Empire. The Empire wants more recruitment capacity, more recruitment rank, and cheaper troops, all of which this provides. After that, you're going to be starting to get up towards rank 12. It's worth snagging his unique line up here. Tempered Aura is quite nice because it gives additional armies to allies in range, but only if Gelt is not in melee combat, which, considering he's a wizard, he should be standing behind his troops anyway. But that's 15 armor combined with his trait of 20. Your average infantry unit in battle is going to have plus 35 armor. It's really strong. Now you also have compounding medicines, more replenishment rate, less chance of plague, less attrition. It's why you don't necessarily need to do Reassuring Presence, but if you wanted to combine them, that's 55% less casualty attrition, which is huge. New formulations, once you get Hellstorm rocket batteries, you want this. Don't take it prior to that. Golden Mask, I find this to be one of the weaker ones in his tree here. Yes, it gives him armor and makes him immune to psychology, but he shouldn't be in combat enough to have to worry about how much armor he has. Will of the Patriarch is quite interesting. If you choose to use wizards for their actions rather than sticking them in your armies, this is quite useful. The other benefit here is it allows you to recruit wizards at rank 4 automatically, because you get 2 from his faction trait plus 2 here. They're significantly better. And the last one, Lore of Metal, makes his Lore of Metals cool down faster and even cheaper. Combined with the single action and his starting trait, casting metal spells is really cheap for Gelt, which helps because he really loves to spam the spells, Searing Doom and Genna's Golden Hounds. Final Transmutation is worth mentioning because you want to drop that probably on like Vampire Lords if you're fighting them. Hold the Line also is a trait you're going to want to snag. Fairly early on, it's another buff, melee defense and leadership to people around you. Combined with the armor bonus, your frontline troops are going to hold out for a long time. He also gets a Pegasus later on, which is really awesome. Now, you do have one choice to make in Gelt's tree. You can choose hardened shots, or you can choose hardened blades. I heavily recommend hardened shots. Why? Your infantry units of your empire are not really meant to kill things. Their weapon strength is not the best. It's 28. Now, I'm not saying the range units are any better, but if you're not losing troops and you're having your gun units fire for a long time, you're going to see a bigger benefit from doing this, especially once you get into some of the later long-ranged gunpowder units. Whereas I found buffing the melee units doesn't make a big difference because the Empire shouldn't win the campaign using infantry units. Yes, they're there to hold the line, but not really to kill tons of stuff. Gelt has access to his standard quests. It's worth doing once you get going. I wouldn't do them as soon as they appear. You're probably far too weak to cast this. To teleport to this battle and win at the start of the game. Plus, they're also back in the Empire, most of them. Now, let's talk about Gelt's starting situation. So yes, we mentioned he's in southern Cathay, but what I didn't mention is he starts off with a mission. He has got a decision of 3 choices to interact with the western provinces here. This guy will give you a mission initially to secure this area. Once that's done, you'll get another mission to secure this province, of which the capital is here, there's a settlement here, and you're going to want to set up. So it's 1 settlement, 2 settlements, 3 settlements, 4, and 5. At that point of the campaign, which should probably be about turn 14, 15, depending on how long you take, you'll be given a decision. You can stay in Cathay, or you can head back to the Empire. If you head back to the Empire, you'll get like 30,000 gold or more, plus whatever you had and all your units. And I'll show you kind of what that looks like once you get back there, because then you get Imperial Authority, and the game continues basically the way it did prior to Gelt moving to Cathay. If you choose to stay, you can have various interactions with the Cathayans. You can fight them. You can kind of get alliances and trade agreements with them. Thankfully, they like you. And if you spend the time to get ambassador to the Dragon Empire, Cathay is going to love you. You're going to have great allies, and you can expand wherever you like. Now, where do you want to expand? Well, you can subdue the vampire Cathay faction here. You can fight off the Dark Elf pirates up here. You could try and mess around with Spirits of the Jungle, but there's really no reason to. I recommend a better strategy is to, first off, try and kill off the vampires if you want land in Cathay. Otherwise, leave Cathay and invade this area, where you'll be fighting vampire counts. Thankfully, these are much easier vampire counts than the ones back in Sylvania. No Vlad and Isabella. Instead, you're stuck with the annoying zombie spam of this faction. But by the time you've subdued 2 regions in Cathay, you should be able to produce decent troops. If you bring bright wizards, the flame wizards, it'll be even easier. You can easily subdue this area. Sadly, this is an uninhabitable climate for you. You could either just raise it or turn off taxes and build a public order building and then just ignore it. But then you will get access to fighting the Nurgle faction if they haven't already been killed by Gorst. At which point you will have 4 or 5 provinces here, and you can either fight ogres, you can fight the Chaos Dwarfs, which is actually a fun fight for Gelt because you heavily have abilities that strip armor from people. You have several of them, and the Chaos Dwarves rely on armor. So in some ways, Gelt is one of the worst opponents for them. So let's jump forward in time and head back to the Empire. Okay, here we are. So, unfortunately, I didn't have the world's best save for what I wanted, but here we are back in the Empire as Gelt. So this looks fairly similar to how you might have remembered Gelt's Empire play. You've got your Imperial Authority, you've got land, and guess what? We're fighting vampires. So you will spawn back near Altdorf, if I recall 100% correctly, you'll be given like 30,000, 35,000 gold, which really helps. And for a handful of turns, you will have no upkeep cost. So before you finish the last conquest of the settlement in Cathay, the one that completes the second mission for the Western Empire, or the Western provinces, you want to make sure you've got a good army, because that's the army you're going to get when you get back to the Empire. Now, this is where I wanted to mention again, you have access to these state troops. As you can see, I bought 3 of them. So I spent 3 times that. I spent 20-something thousand gold on getting these state troops as soon as I came back to the Empire. Why did I do that? Well, I wanted enough troops that were good that I could actually afford to fight with. So if you look at what I've got here, we've got several of the Elector Count troops, and I can recruit other ones if I lose some. I haven't done that yet because at this point my income is suffering. So once you get back to the Empire, you will own no land. You'll basically be a horde. You have several choices of where you want to go. Now the important thing is you're stuck with Imperial authority once you get land back in the Empire. You don't necessarily have to take land in the Empire. A very decent strategy would be to head over here, take out the Barrow Legion, set up an empire in Blackstone Post and the rest of Bretonnia, assuming they're winning there. You could rush over here and take Marienburg, also another strategy, and then do the same thing and control the western part, which would free up Franz and Elsbeth to start and fight Vlad and the other lords better. However, I found an actual better strategy was to march north, and if you can, it might take a little of ambushing and sneaky moves, take the Brass Keep from the Warriors of Chaos Nurgle faction right there. Why would I recommend this as a strategy? Well, if you can do that, that removes one of the largest threats to the north of the Empire. For some reason, Franz and the other Elector Counts struggle with removing that Warrior of Chaos faction. If you do it, you get the Brass Keep, which is a suitable climate. You can fortify it. It's usually level 2 or 3. It's a very defensive location. Not much is going to be invading you, especially if Hochland survives. If they don't, you get their land too. Wolfenburg over here is worth mentioning because it has a gold mine, which can really help your early game economy. If you'll note, I've desperately been building up the gold mine at this point in my campaign. Then you've got choices. You can either fight your way north, which I really don't recommend unless the Kislev factions have fallen completely. It's better to be friends with them, but then you can march south through Tabekland and start fighting Vlad. Vlad is probably going to attack you anyway, so it's a good move. Now, a couple things to note about this. This area over here, you want to ignore as much as possible. It's nigh on undefendable with the greenskins, dwarves, vampires, Wargrove of Woe. This is not a great point to try and defend until you've subdued the vampires at minimum. So marching south, trying to take out stuff from Vlad is the way to go. Now, if you've been playing right and you've got a lot of wizards, you'll also probably get a warrior priest or an empire captain through events. All of those together, you can smash Vlad. Once you smash Vlad's first army, the campaign becomes significantly easier because he will not have access to these graveyards and other units for quite some time. Yes, he can raise new armies, but a lot of them will be skeletal warriors or vampires. He'll still be a threat. He'll still retake provinces, but it won't feel as overwhelming death as his starting army. Now, a couple places to note. Talabheim here, if it's fallen to the vampires, is a great place to take early on in your war with vampires and just fortify. If you choose to take this rather than going for the Warriors of Chaos Nurgle faction, it's also a decent starting location. You're going to want to fortify it. Basic walls leveled up with an empire capital at 2 or 3 can hold off almost a vampire army with just a handful of troops here. It's quite possible. With these 10, I think I smashed one of Vlad's better armies. But the other point to note is Würtburg down here, or Wurtbad, is a great province to occupy in your war with the vampires. It's a central location. Vlad has probably taken over this area, and from it you can march out. The vampires seem abnormally obsessed with Krugenheim and Niedling, which makes defending and retaking them much easier. Obviously, the goal is Drakenhof. Now, you might ask, why don't we just march to Drakenhof when we come back to the Empire? You can. The trick is you have to take it while Vlad and his other armies are off fighting elsewhere. But if you do, you'll smash the vampires to a large degree. The problem is you have to deal with the corruption, rebuilding it, all while fending off Vlad's armies. I found it much easier to take out the Warriors of Chaos, then use that as a base to march south. Later on, you've got the standard Reunite the Empire, clear out any Chaos Warriors, Nurgle factions. It's worth mentioning smashing this Warriors of Chaos, the Ecstatic Legion, fairly early on. Even if you just run up there with an army and raise it, really relieves a lot of the pressure on Kislev. Same thing if you can get Hell Pit. At which point, Kislev will usually take over the whole Chaos Waste, and you can kind of ignore that fact. Your short victory deserves a mention because it is not a conquest victory as in wipe out factions. Instead, you just have to use 12 unique College of Magic repeatable actions. So every time you summon a wizard, heal your army, seriously, you just have to do like 4 of these, and you've got only then have to take or sack or own 30 settlements, which you've already have done 6 in Cathay if you come back. By the time you finish off the vampires, you'll be in the mid-20s. Then a short expedition up north into Norska will easily give you a short victory. I've got a short victory, I think, around like turn 70, which is abnormally fast for me on harder difficulties. Anyway, that's Balthazar Gelt, his 2 different strategies: return to the Empire, stay in Cathay, his unique mechanics, the fact that you can get Imperial authority when you come back to the Empire. Be aware, of course, you have to retake the Empire or you're going to suffer penalties. Overall, it's really fun. I love the over-focus on magic because it's something that I don't usually do when I play the other Empire factions. But the bonuses and repeatable actions really do encourage you to have 2 or 3 wizards in each army. So if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, as I mentioned before. Check out the other videos in the playlist and series. And I hope to see you all in another Let's Player video. Bye for now.